Hello, everyone. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, whichever time zone you may be calling us in from today. Thank you for joining. My name is Rebecca Cronin, and I'm one of the Customer Success Managers here with the Altair Data Analytics team. Now, some of you might recognize my voice or name from either participating in our complimentary onboarding sessions, or perhaps these webinars, or within our user community. The Customer Success team, we're here as another point of contact for you to reach out at any time with any questions or concerns you may have regarding Altair solutions, as well as if you're unable to get a hold of your account manager. We also can assist you with receiving access to the user community or even to Altair One. If you haven't joined the user community, highly recommend to do so. It's a great way to collaborate with your fellow peers, as well as our product experts. You have the opportunity to submit discussion posts, as well as answering these for your fellow colleagues. It's also a great link to the different resources such as our e-learning, documentation, and how-to videos. And if you ever have any questions, the team does have a mailbox, da-at csm@altair.com. So before we get going, a little housekeeping. You'll see a control panel. There's a handout section. It is a copy of today's PowerPoint presentation, which happens to have a link to some of those helpful resources, as well as our team mailbox. You'll also see a question panel where you have the opportunity, or it might be a chat panel where you can submit your question. Note, it's only seen by the panelists. And so if this is something you want to ask offline, please make sure you mention to be private. Otherwise, we'll share that question with those that are in attendance, as well as any pre-registered question, because we never know, someone may have the exact same question you're encountering. If we don't get a chance to complete and answer your question, we will do our best to get back to you within 2 to 5 business days. And if necessary, we could open a support ticket for continued follow-up. So, with no further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our expert today. It's Steve Caiels. He's one of our senior professional service consultants. He's worked over 29 years in various technical support roles, including that of Altair, with 20+ years. He started off as a technical support engineer, promoted to pre-sales consultant and training specialist. He leads by example. Is a great resource for us as well as our customers. And you might have even had the benefit of working with him. So today's topic is verifying accuracy of the data you export in Monarch Complete. So as Steve is presenting, please feel free to ask any questions in that control panel, and we'll answer them accordingly. And again, the topic, by the way, does not have to be the question you might have. You might have something on server or classic mode or whatever kind of particular capability function you're trying to accomplish. We will do our best to answer those. So now handing it over to Steve to take over. And
Thanks
Steve, I see your Monarch Data Prep Studio.
Perfect. Great. Thanks very much. Okay, so yeah, as Rebecca mentioned there, today is all about making sure we're extracting the data that we think we're extracting. So Monarch is an incredibly flexible tool. There's lots of options in there. There's lots of advanced options in there. But at the end of the day, it's going to extract what we tell it to extract. There are a couple of built-in functions that allow us to validate the structure of the data that we're bringing out. So things like is it a valid date field? Are there characters in what we're expecting to be a numeric field? Truncation of fields, all those sorts of things are built into the product. But there may be times where we want to be able to do a little bit deeper validation. For example, is a date within a specific range? Is it less than 90 days old? Is a numeric value within an expected range? Is an item number the correct format, the correct length, or that character in the 3rd position where we're expecting a numeric, and all these sorts of things. So all this sort of much more granular verification requires us to build a validation data table. So there's 2 advantages to building the validation table. One is that we can do whatever we like. in terms of validating it, much more granular than the built-in functionality. But also, if you're an automator customer, you can use that validation table to make sure that your automated processes are exporting the expected data. So if your validation table picks up any issues, you can abort the process and maybe send an email as an alert. So it's even more useful if you have Automator. But even if you don't have Automator, I think it has advantages over using the built-in validation. So let me open up a quick report file here just to demonstrate some of these features. Not a hugely complex report file, but it is a little bit messy, and there are lots of validation issues. You can probably already spot things missing and indents and that sort of thing. So there are quite a few validation issues that we want to automatically pick up. Of course, we can spot them here because it's a tiny report and they're on page 1. But if you've got hundreds or thousands of pages in your report, you don't want to be scrolling through manually to find all these issues. I should also mention this is a European dated report. So I'm reading this as the 1st of November, and I know most of the folks on this will be reading this as the 11th of January. So just to simulate what might happen if you are dealing with European reports on an American-based system, I've set my Monarch to recognize American date formats. So there's a mismatch here, and we can use validation to find that mismatch as well. So let me just build a quick detail template, first of all. And the first thing we do when building a detail template is to choose our trap character. Now this is an order report, so I think it's pretty safe to assume that there will always be an order date, because if there wasn't an order date, then it wouldn't be on this report in the first place. So let's make a bad decision straight away. And instead of using the order date, I'm going to use the ship date as my trap. And this straight away brings us into, probably the most common sort of validation type scenario that we see. And it's not necessarily straightforward to pick up because the built-in functionality won't pick this issue up. But you can see I'm only extracting data where there is a ship date. And in this report, I have records that do not contain a ship date. So my report's going to be £102 down, regardless of whatever I do in terms of extracting fields and all of the built-in functionality. So we want to find this problem, but that's just one of the problems that we want to find. So before we come on to the amount, I'll extract a couple of other fields. So the order date, first of all, just going to highlight that as a field. I'll call it order date. And we can see Monarch has recognized this as a valid date, despite having the wrong date format. So what I should be extracting is day, month, year, and I've set my regional settings to American, so it's extracting month, day, year. So you can see the end result of that is that the month and the day get transposed, and instead of seeing the 1st of January, I'm seeing again in European format, because that's the display settings, I'm seeing the 11th of, instead of seeing the 1st of November, I'm seeing the 11th of January. So you can see the day and the month have got transposed. And of course, when we get down to what I'm reading as the 15th of October, there is no 15th month, so that's resulting in a null. So it doesn't really matter that it's a European versus American format. It's just another example of what we can do to check any sort of extraction error. It could be that the dates are drifting around and part of it gets truncated and it shouldn't be, and that sort of thing. So we're just going to validate and make sure that we got a date we're expecting here. Come on to the, I should mention, the report verify. So the built-in functionality, this report verify, this is also available in Monarch Classic, by the way, works in a very similar way. The report verify, typically we use it as we finished building all of the templates, but you can click it after every field if you want. So if I use the report verify now, you can see straight away I'm getting this message, text for field order date cannot be converted into a valid date. And the error is highlighted with these little red marching ants here. So it's telling me something's gone wrong. I can't fix this particular error here, but it does tell me that I need to go and check my date format, and I could resolve it and then come back and verify it again. So the report verify is really useful, but it only has a certain amount of functionality. So let's come back to the trapping. We won't fix it there. We'll fix it in our verification table, or detect it, I should say, in our verification table. Next field I'm going to extract is the item, and I'm just going to call this item. I'm going to leave it as a character field because clearly it contains characters as well. So Monarch's automatically put that in as a character field. And the verification we're going to do here is just relatively straightforward. We're going to say that we're expecting our item field to contain at least 7 characters. You can make the validation more complex and look for characters in certain positions or ranges, whatever you like. But just to show the principle, we're going to say that it should be at least 7 characters. And of course, this row is going to fail that validation test. The next one is the amount. I'm just going to highlight the amount allowing for the thousands column, and you can see straight away that's going to cause an issue for us here in the truncation of this large amount. Once again, the report verify will find that for us, but I'm not going to fix it in the report verify. I want my validation table to detect this for us. So now we're going to have 2 problems with the amount. We're going to be 10,000 out and potentially more for anything we've truncated. And because we've chosen an unsuitable trap character, we're going to be out by the amount of all the records that have not been extracted because of our bad trap character. The final field here, which I'll come into as a separate issue, but just for now I want to run through the options we've got. Vertical validation here on the comment field, you can see we've got a variable length comment field. Now I can use the advanced options here to tell the field to extend down through the page. So the most common one to use would be the blank field values. And you can see that's working pretty well. We're extracting all the data. This little indented comment here is also extracted because the blank field values looks at the entire width of the field, and it keeps on going down until it comes across a blank line. Or until it bumps into the row below. So these, for example, or into a template below, I should say more accurately. So this one here, it's trying to extend down to see if there's any more to catch, but it's immediately bumping into the next template and it's aborting and not causing any problem that they're consecutive. Where we do have an extraction issue is here. We do have a genuine blank line for some reason in the middle of our comments. So on the blank field value, I can correct that by looking for 2 consecutive blank field values, and that fixes this problem. But again, we want the validation to find this for us. I can also make it a little bit worse by, if I change this to end of left justification, now we're going to be missing some data on here as well. But this uses a slightly different technique, and although it could be combined into the same template or into the same workspace, sorry, I think because this is a relatively uncommon scenario, the sort of multiple length fields, I'll just bring this in as a separate workspace. So for now, I'm going to delete the comment field and we'll just concentrate on these 3 main fields that we want to validate. Let's call this one amount, and then we're good to go. So the amount is a genuine numeric field, as we can see here from the field properties. So we'll accept that. And now we can go about building our validation table. So, of course, those of you that have been using Monarch and particularly Data Prep Studio, you know that you've got a load of transforms. You can pivot, unpivot, append data together, join tables in lots of different ways. So there's a whole load of things we can be doing to our data once we get it into the prepare window. But typically, the validation works best on raw data. I guess there's no real right or wrong. My preference is to validate the raw data. But if you preferred, you could do a load of work in your load plan here and do all of your joins and transforms and everything, and then create a validation table based on the end result. So whichever you choose to do, what we want to be able to export is our final data. So I'm just going to assume there's nothing more that I want to do here. So I'm just going to rename this to final data. And we also want to create a separate validation table. And that validation table, as I say, can be based on the very first stage or the very last stage. It's entirely up to you. So wherever you decide to do that, you do a right-click, duplicate, and now I can rename this to be my validation table. And the idea is I want my validation table to only contain records that fail the validation. So ideally, this should be empty. When we have a look at Automator, we'll see it's very easy to abort the process based on whether a table is empty or contains rows. So let's go about only having the validation errors in this data table. Well, we can see straight away that we've got some nulls here. This is where it's not been able to convert the 15th month. But But again, the whole point of doing this validation table is it allows us to validate at a much more granular level. So let's say that we want the date to be within the last 2 years, for example. The easiest way to do this is to create a separate validation column for every one of your data columns that you want to validate. So I'm going to do a right-click, column, new formula-based column, and I tend to call it a V just to denote that it's a validation table, and then the same name as the original field. And the expression we typically want to use is an if function that tells us whether the data is valid or not. So the format is always if, open brackets, then we would have our validation expression. So just to get the syntax right, I'm going to say 1 equals 1. So of course that will always be true, that will always validate. If it validates, we want to return a 0. If it doesn't validate, later on when we put a proper validation expression in there, we want to return a 1. So you can see the result is our order date validation column that if the value is good, if the data is good, will contain a 0. And if the data is not good, so if I change that to something that's always going to fail, 1 equals 2, of course, is never going to validate, then we have a column containing a 1. So if we sum this order date column, that will tell us how many date-based validation errors we have in our data set. Now, of course, we don't want 1 equals 2 as our validation, so we can bring that onto a line of its own. And what we now need to do is to put into here is our suitable validation. So there's a whole load. There's a date adjust function where we can add years, months, or days to a date and work out whether it's within a range. We can work out whether it's got a 2-digit year field or a 4-digit year field, all these sorts of things. But in this case, I just want to say that I'm expecting the order date to be within the last 2 years. So we'll just do year, open bracket, order date. I could make this dynamic by taking it away from the current year, but just for speed, I'll say that it must be greater than 2020, let's say, within the last 4 years. So these nulls are going to have a 1 in them because clearly that's a validation error. And also, if we look down through the report, we can see there's another one somewhere. I can find it. Just there we go. There's another one here where we've got, for some reason, we've got an old order date in here, so we're getting a validation error of 1 on that. And we then just really repeat the same process for the other fields here, for the item, for example. So the item, remember the rule was that we were expecting the item code to be at least 7 characters or greater than 6 characters long. So again, right click. In fact, what I'll just quickly do is I'll save a bit of time. I'll edit the change to save this, get that into the clipboard. I'll do a right click, column, new formula based column called the item. And the expression is going to be len, that's the length of a character-based field. Len of the item field must be greater than 6. And again, you can see here, now this is the one record that's going to fail that validation. So in terms of data type, we can just repeat that as many times as we like for all of our different columns. Not quite the case for the amount. The problem we've got on the amount is twofold. First of all, we've got truncation. So this 580 here, if we look at the reports, this is truncated. It should be 10,580. But because the error has been made at the time we're extracting the data, it's too late to validate it and work out that this should really be 10,580 at this stage. The other issue we've got is that we're missing a record here. We're missing the 102. So we'll see the 672 and then the 192 are next to each other, and the 102 is missing because it's not being met by our trap. So we need to validate this in a slightly different way. For this particular report, we do have totals in here. So the idea is we can add up all of our amounts, and of course these amounts should sum to our total. So this is the easiest way or the best way. If you do have totals available in your reports, it's best to validate it against those totals. If you don't have totals, you can still do it, and we'll have a look at a report that doesn't have totals to cover that in a moment or two. But in this case, we do have the totals. Of course, those totals are not in my validation table at the moment. So first thing I need to do is to edit in report design. So even though I don't really want the totals as part of my main data extraction, because we're doing this as a separate validation table, it's straightforward to just bring these in. Important I bring them in as a footer because they're below the data they relate to, so I must make sure I use footer instead of append. I'm going to trap on store total. It's not case sensitive, and I'm going to just have a nice big long highlight and call this store total. And because we are validating at store level, I also need to know which store all these totals belong to. So I'll bring the store ID in, which conveniently in this case is on the same line as the store total. But if it wasn't, I could bring it in as another template, of course. Monarch has brought this in as a numeric field because, of course, it's a numeric value. So we've lost our leading 0. We can stop that happening by changing it to a character field. It would still work, but it should really be a character field. And bring those 2 new columns in. So now we have the raw data we need. You can see we've got all these records from store 23. If I sum up the values for store 23, it should equal the store total. And the way I do that, and the way I check how many validation errors I've got on all my other fields, is to combine these in a transformation. Sorry, I shouldn't use the word combine. Combine means something different. It's to group these in a transformation. So we come into our transform option, we come into group, and I want to group by store ID because that's how I'm validating my totals. I don't really need all these other fields. Remember, this is not our raw data, so we only need to have the minimum here. So I'm going to just bring in my order date, and I'm going to sum up the number of errors in the order date, sum up the number of errors in the item. I'm going to sum up my amounts. And the store total, it's important that I change this. I don't want to sum up because you can see I've got the total amount and I don't want to duplicate that for every row. So instead of the sum, I want that to be the average. Or I could use minimum or maximum. It's the same, obviously. So I'll choose average. And what this now gives us is a table where we can see straight away, looking at row 23, I've got 4 problems with the dates. The item is okay, but I do have 1 problem with the item on store number 7. And if I create a delta between these 2, then this will tell us whether the amount is okay or not. So I can do a right click, compute, calculator, and doesn't matter which order we do this in. I want my sum amounts minus my store total. And of course here, this is the delta. This should be 0. And you can see it is for the other stores, but clearly we're getting a problem here of quite a large problem here on the sum amount. I can delete these 2 columns, don't need these anymore. I'm only interested in the delta. What I can finally do now is add these 3 columns together. My good data, my good stores, are going to have a sum of 0. All the stores that contain a problem are going to have a non-zero value. I suppose you could argue that these could net each other out. So I suppose I should probably maybe rather than using the calculate, I probably should have used a calculated field and used the absolute function so that these are always positive values, but I'll skip over that for now. But that's only something that's just occurred to me here. We need to make sure these don't net themselves out. So again, just for speed, I'll use the compute calculate, and we'll take the order value, where's the plus the other 2 validations. And now we can filter our final sort of total error count, and saying that this must must equal 0. Must not equal 0. Sorry, does not equal 0. So now we're only left with the problematic stores. Obviously, there's quite a lot in this case because I wanted to cram lots of errors into one place. But if I bring a better report in, so this one doesn't have the same validation issues. I'm just going to bring this one in to replace it for a second on the validation table. Delete that one for a moment. So here you can see straight away we're in much better shape. We do still have a load of date issues, but all the other validation issues have been resolved. And the reason we still have a date issue is because I'm still looking for an American date format for a European report. So I'll quickly come into here, change this conversion back to my European format. So what we're looking for, what we really want to see, is a completely empty validation table here. Just rename that, of course. So when the validation's good, everything passes, we've got a completely empty table. But as you saw previously, when there's a bad validation in there, we're going to have some rows in there. So it becomes a very sort of quick and easy way of seeing. We can just, if we're using a Data Prep Studio session interactively, we can just quickly look at this validation table and immediately see how many problems we got, the extent of the problems, which store numbers we've got those problems on, and that sort of thing. But maybe more importantly, particularly if you're an automator user, we can create a quick process in here. And in this process, we can use this verify workspace icon. So you don't have to use that. A process can just be straightforward, a workspace and an export. In this case, it's going to perform whatever export you tell it to do, regardless of whether the data validates or not. But by dropping in this validate workspace, you can see we can check the validation node, load plan, whatever you've called it there, and check that the number of rows is equal to 0. And if that's not the case, then we will stop the process. And you see if I run that now, because this is using the bad report, not the good one I loaded for the demonstration, you can see that immediately it's failed the verification. So there's only one error in here actually, but we were expecting no rows, but we do get one row telling us there's at least one validation issue. And in this case, it's aborted the process and come down and just sent created a log distribution. But this could now email the verification table to a recipient if you wanted to. So they would have the data arrive directly in their inbox. You could also then move the input files into a holding folder so that you could carry on processing other data if you wanted to. So it becomes more powerful and sort of more useful if you have Automator. But I think it does also have a lot of use directly within the workspace itself. So I'm just going to pause there and see if there's any questions related to that. I don't see any questions at the moment. No. Okay. So I'm just going to bring the bad report back in again, just to bring that in sort of visually. This is the original bad one, and then I can delete. So this one now you can see is going to be in slightly better shape because I've corrected the date issue. So it's now just picking up these are genuine bad dates. I think one was 1980 or something like that, and there's another old date in there as well. And then we can see we've got the validation issue of the short item code back in there again. So it tells us the store ID. Doesn't show us specifically which line is causing the validation. I guess you could probably build the workspace in a way that would show you that, but this is just telling you which store ID is causing the issues. So on this first run through, I skipped over the comments. So if there's no questions, I don't believe there's any new. Let me open up a workspace that will allow us to address the issue with the comments. It is a bit more complicated. There's more steps involved. So it could be brought into the same workspace, but I didn't want to sort of crash the two in together unnecessarily.
Steve, quick question.
Yeah.
With the amount, would report verify have captured that 10,000?
Absolutely, it would. Yes. Yeah. So,
okay. So like best practice is like when you're trapping to run that, just obviously it's not going to capture the date, but it captured at least a field or the amount.
Yeah, for sure. So the report verify, if you're in an interactive Monarch session or Data Prep Studio session, then this report verify is it's always good to click that every time you open up a new report. Because of course, when we're building the report, we can only verify what we have in that particular report example. We don't know what we're going to be seeing 6 months in the future. So it's a good idea to continue to use this in Data Prep Studio. Yeah. But yeah, if I click on it, you can see here it's found that problem for us, which we could then interactively fix. So slight difference there in Automator. If you're a Monarch Classic user, The report verify function, you can actually effectively dynamically run that if you're using a Monarch Classic model. You don't have that ability to dynamically run it in an automator process using a workspace, using a Data Prep Studio workspace. So this concept of building a verification table becomes even more valuable in Data Prep Studio. In theory, you could build a verification table using Monarch Classic, but for those of you that use Classic, you'll know that you don't really have this ability to sort of group things within a single working session. So you'd probably have to extract a view, summarize it, export it to CSV, bring it back in. You'd end up doing a multi-phase process to get the same results. But you could, in theory, apply this same technique to Classic if you wanted to. It's a whole lot easier in Data Prep Studio, though. So let me leave that one behind and just bring in the comment workspace instead. So you can see the comment workspace. The end result is that we are badly extracting 2 comments. Again, this is a verification table. So let's see how we got to this stage. You can see it's a bit more involved, but we do get there. So just coming back to the totals, just coming back to the bare report. So this is a pretty standard extraction. In order to work out where the comments are missing, we have to have something unique to attach the comments to. So in this particular report, the order number and the item number form a unique reference that we can use to join back to the comments. So you do need to have some sort of unique reference for this to be particular. It will detect errors if you don't have a unique reference, but it wouldn't let you see where those errors are. So it's more useful if you have a unique reference. So we just extract it in the normal way. You can see I'm using end of left justification here in the advanced field options. So we're missing the 2 because this left-hand margin is broken. And we're missing the warehouse, again, because the left-hand margin is broken. Now, I could fix both of these by using a more suitable advanced field option. But the whole point here is that we're getting it to verify, to find those problems for us, not necessarily to fix it in an interactive scenario. So just to step through how this is done. So the raw data comes in pretty much as we see there. We've got multi-line fields, and before there are any changes to it, we've got the same multi-line fields, including the missing 3rd line of comment number 4, and the warehouse, I think, is missing off comment number 11 or line number 11. So there's a couple of moves here, not doing anything significant. So the most significant thing here is we want to split these comments out into separate columns. And that then enables us to do sort of pivots and unpivots and joins to work out what's there and what's missing. So this split here, when you have a look at the split, you just do a right-click split field from the left or right, doesn't matter. There's an option here where you can use these sort of control characters to split. So by ticking this option, it enables the drop down, and you can then say split it on a new line. So I've just gone through and redone that. And you can see it's automatically detected that there are 3. So we've got no more than 3 lines of comment for this particular report. But of course, what we're trying to do is to build something that we can use to verify future reports. So the one thing that we do need to be a little bit careful of, and is a constraint to keep in mind, is we have to choose a column count here that we know is going to satisfy our future requirements. Now, it can be really high. You can have this set to 100, up to, I'm not sure whether it's 254 or even 999, to be honest, but you're unlikely to have that many lines in a comment, hopefully. So I'm just going to go for 10 here as an example, but you will need to manually increase that if you're expecting longer comments in the future. So you can see the end result of this split now is that we have, in this case, 3 potentially populated comments, followed by 7 comments that are always blank at the moment. But here we should have had to back order 5, comment, where's the one that's missing? I can't quite find where it is, to be honest, but I think this one, there should be a row that had to back order 2. I think maybe there should be a 2 in here. Oh yeah, sorry, ship 5, but had to back order 2. So we're missing the 2, we're missing the word warehouse from another one. So now that we've got all these comments in separate columns, you actually want to put them back into separate lines again. So we're sort of breaking it to glue it back apart in the way that we want. And the way we get them back into separate lines so that each comment comes onto a new line is to unpivot the table. So this unpivot function here, you can see we're back into the situation where we've got each comment on a separate row, but the big difference is here, we've got all of the comments combined into one field. So we've got one record per order number and item, whereas once we've broken it apart and unpivoted it back together again, should have redone those changes. Once we've broken it apart and put it back together again, you can see that we've now got 3 separate records. So it makes it easy to sort of join it back in again and work out what's missing. And the way we do that is by unpivoting. And we just choose to unpivot every one of our 10 columns. So if you have chosen 100, that's going to take a bit of time, but you've only got to do it once. Unpivot all the comment columns. Bring in your other columns that allow you to identify it as normal attribute columns, and that's what you end up with. So this is really just extracting the data in a way that we need to be able to join it back in together again. What we now need to do is to work out, have we really got all of our comments or not? And that's what this table here is all about. So this, you can see, it looks pretty similar, but the significant difference here is that we have our 5. So we've got ship 5, but had to back order 5. Whereas the stuff we're actually extracting is ship, sorry, it was a different record, wasn't it? Ship 5, but had to back order 2. This is the one. So ship 5, but had to back order, and you can see that the 2 is missing from this combined order number and product. Whereas if we go into the comments here, you can see it's ship 5, but had to back order 2 with that indented 2 there, which is the reason it's missing from our extraction. So how do we sort of, why couldn't we just do that in the first place? Well, remember, what we're trying to do is we're using Monarch to do other stuff. We're not just validating the comments here. We're also extracting potentially order totals and ship dates and summarizing it and pivoting it and doing all the sort of normal Monarch type stuff that we need to do. So we're constrained a little bit into having this as the detail. And having this as the detail means we have to bring this in as one cell and then break it out and put it back together again, as you've seen back in one cell. But in our validation, because this is only being used for validation, we don't have those same constraints. So what we can actually do here is to just bring everything in, the entire report. And it's going to look a real mess to start with, but it's guaranteed to give us all the data that we can then join back in together again. So looking at the report design, the safest way to make sure that we extract absolutely everything is to not use a trap. And it's a little bit unusual in Monarch to not use a trap, and it's really only in this sort of validation type scenario that I can think it's useful. But by not doing a trap, every line in the report is going to create a detail row. So that way we're guaranteed to extract all of the comments. Doesn't matter whether there's a higher date or any other trap that we've used there, because we're not using a trap. But of course, it gives us a really messy table. Here we can see, here we've got the ship 5 but had to back order 5. There's a whole load of junk stuff above it. But that doesn't really matter because we can just tidy that up. So if we look at the raw data, effectively what we've got now is the entire report, but in a way where we've got all the data given to us. And of course, I didn't mean to, I should have not have undone those changes. But of course now we can tidy that up again. We can just move the columns around, filter them out. These are all just change in display widths. So this getting rid of the nulls or filling in the item number so that we can associate it. So without that, you can see we know the order number and the item number for the first line of the comments. We don't know the item number for the subsequent line of the comments. So we use the ditto version to fill that in. So little display width change. And then eventually there's a filter to get rid of all the stuff that we don't want. So we now end up with a data view that contains all of our comments. Once we've done that, it's just a case of joining these two together. So we join it by order number and item number, and we do a negative join, and that'll tell us all the ones that we don't see in both tables. So the end result is that we're joining on order number, item number, and the comments, which is called value in the other table, that probably should be called comments. So we join on all 3 fields. do a negative join, which will show us all the ones that don't match. And there you go. We end up, we've taken our extracted data, which we know has got stuff missing. We've taken our all data, which we know will inherently have everything. And then the negative join gives us the mismatch between the two. So a little bit more involved, and I know that's probably a slightly unusual scenario, but I just wanted to cover, we can do this verification in multi-line fields as well, if that's absolutely necessary. The final example is how we can go back to that first one where we're truncating the data or missing a record because we've chosen a bad trap character, how we can do that if there aren't any totals in the report. So again, I'm just going to check comments. I don't see any questions at the moment. So again, let me close that workspace and open up the final workspace. So this workspace, or this report, I should say, you can see doesn't contain any totals. So we can't use the technique we used on the first example, which was to bring in the totals as a footer and then group it and sort of validate it against an individual footer. So this is a little bit like the comment section, really a bit more like the comment section than the initial section. So what we've done here is you can imagine the trap is on the hire date, and we have reports that don't contain a hire date. So this could be a truncation issue like we saw in the first report, but in this case it's a detail missing issue. Because this detail doesn't satisfy the trap, it's not going to be in our data table. So the trap data contains 99 rows, it contains a row missing. But the technique is the same. What we want to do is to get all of our trap data the way we want it, and then we do the same thing again, using the same technique of not having a detail, not having a trap, sorry. So in this case, you can see again, there's no trap. That means that our extraction is going to be every single row. We just grab one big long field. So this eliminates any sort of drifting issues or anything like that. We just grab a big long field, and then we'll be able to extract the salary off the end of each of these fields, knowing that we've got every row because we're not using a trap, and then we can use that to validate against our extracted data. So of course now you can see this is the record where we don't have a hire date. The 19562, which is missing from our live extraction, is going to be in our sort of untracked extraction. Little side note here, not absolutely necessary, but what we want to do is to grab the last number off all of our data, and that's going to get complicated by the fact that we have this building number 9. So if we try and grab the last bit, there's not going to be any differentiation in the table in terms of our calculation as to whether it's a salary or whether it's a building number. So of course we're going to be out by that value. So we could do a filter of, if it's less than 100 or something, assume it's a building number, but you might have really big building numbers, I suppose. So a slightly safer way of doing it is to create an exclusion trap. And the exclusion trap will specifically get rid of every line that contains an office location. So we want to avoid doing this to a certain extent because we might be excluding stuff that we really want to include. But if you're absolutely sure it's safe to use, then there's no problem with using an exclusion trap. So we get into our all data. Again, if I just remove all the changes here, again, I'll have to undo this change because as soon as I change it, I'm going to lose my change list. But there you can see that's basically the entire report with our data in there somewhere, but not really in a usable way at the moment. So we get it to be usable, change the display width. Obviously, these are just collapsing all the spaces, makes it easier to get rid of any trailing spaces. And then we just split it into one part from the right-hand side. So now we've got rid of all of the junk apart from the very last word, effectively. Convert it to numeric. So what this is going to do is this is going to tidy it up in one go for us, because when we convert it to numeric, all of these are going to change to nulls. And then we can just filter out the nulls. And now we have a, I'll come on to that in a second. Now we have a row of all of the salaries, including the one that's not extracted in our main data table. The final thing to do is just to join the two together. We have to sum this up into a report total. So effectively, because our report doesn't have a report total, we're having to generate our own report total. And the easiest way to do that is to create a static field. I've just used the text report total. You can use any text you like. And then we can just group it by that word report total. And this is what we should be seeing if we know we're extracting all the data. We've got our trap data here. We can now join the two together. So we've got our individual salaries and our report total salaries. And the very final stage is to group it in the same way that we did with that very first example. So we take our sum salary, compare it to our average salary, and then work out if there's a delta. Obviously, what we're hoping to see here is a 0, but what we're actually seeing is the 19,562.50, which of course is the 19,562.50 that we're missing from the report. So it's a bit of a lightning tour. I wanted to cover the sort of the three main scenarios of how we make sure that the data is extracted perfectly. And of course, it does complicate the workspace. That's the penalty. That's the price you have to pay for that. Instead of having just a nice, neat workspace, basically doing this, you've got all of these joins and groups and all that sort of thing. But once you've done that, you've got it there available to use. It gives you a very easy validation. And maybe more importantly, it gives you something that you can put into a automated process and validate the process and abort it automatically. And that brings me to the end of the topic. I don't see any questions. Do you want me to go on to the pre-submitted questions, Rebecca? Or?
Yes, let's go ahead and go into that.
Yep. Okay, let me just remind myself. So there was a question, had a couple of parts to it, which basically was a sort of a data capacity issue. The customer was trying to open up a whole load of very large Excel files. So each file had 1 million rows. Sometimes there were up to 36 of these Excel files, and it was causing Monarch to crash. It didn't explicitly say in the question, but there was also a question about, do we have a 64-bit version? So I'm assuming the customer is using 32-bit Monarch. 32-bit Monarch, or any 32-bit application, is restricted typically to 2 gig. It can be tweaked so that you can get it to use 4 gig. But even that, even 4 gig is probably not going to be enough. Excel is not the sort of the best in terms of memory usage, especially if you've got multiple tabs and all those sorts of things in there. So almost certainly this is running out of available memory. The 64-bit version of Monarch might well resolve it, but you will still be limited to the amount of memory you have available. So if you've got 32 gig or maybe even 64 gig on your laptop or on your PC, and you're using the 64-bit version of Monarch, you might be able to load all of those together, but you're going to have to be patient with it. You know, it has to read all the data, it has to parse all the data, and I think probably 36 files with 1 million rows is probably pushing the desktop product beyond its sort of useful limits. I've dealt with workspaces with 15 million rows in, and it takes sort of 20-25 minutes to draw that workspace. Obviously, a huge factor there is the complexity of the workspace. If you've got pivots and unpivots and joins in there, then 15 million is going to be unusable. So I think the two things. First of all, try and get 64-bit installed if you can. Make sure you've got plenty of memory, at least 16 gig I would recommend, if not 32, 64 even. Or also, if you have Automator available, what you can do maybe is to build the process based on one Excel file as an example. And as long as those other Excel files are the same format, you can then build an Automator process which will cycle through all of your 36 Excel files, process them one at a time effectively, and it will manage them. It will do that. It will do it in small chunks and automate the process for you. So no magic switch, unfortunately, but there are options, especially if you have Automator. There was a linked question to that in the Excel files, even though it sounds like they're all in the same format, there is inconsistency in the data. So there's something like an account number maybe, or a part number, and that's typically numeric, but sometimes has characters in it. So what will happen is if you bring that file into Data Prep Studio or into Monarch, it will determine the field based on the sample. So it may be recognizing it as a numeric field based on the particular sample you've opened. If you then try and bring in one that's got alphanumeric in that same column, they'll end up being nulls in the data table because that field has already been set to numeric. And of course, you can't have characters in a numeric field. Once you've got it into your prepare window and you've got nulls in there, converting it is not going to help. So you do have the option. It doesn't make sense here, but you can see, if this was a numeric field that had nulls in it, if I convert it to a character field here, I'm going to end up with blanks where there were nulls. It's not going to go back and resample the data and reread it in and fix it because it's now a character field. You can see the journey here is it's coming in as a numeric, and then later on I'm changing it to a character field, but the damage is already done at that stage. So what you would need to do is to go back to the load options and bring all those fields, manually set all those fields to character, then append them together, and then once they're appended, you could choose your relevant data type, put it to numeric if you wanted to, or do some calculations based on numeric, whatever you want. But typically, the rule is if you don't want to do mathematics on it, if you don't want to divide it by 10 or add it up, then it really typically should be a character field anyway. So things like telephone numbers, order numbers, reference numbers usually would be character. So hopefully that wasn't too generic. We don't have samples of the data, so hopefully that's answered your question. But if not, please get in touch with us and we can look at it in more detail.
While folks might try to think of a question, I'm going to launch the poll question. This is for us to decide what new topic we'd like to review in February. So if your screen is in full view, you'll want to minimize it to be able to select an option. So choices that we have are DPS summaries and analyze window, review multi-column region trapping, perhaps let's review regex trapping, and then the other is if you had a different topic, different functionality you'd like to review, Monarch Server, etc., select the other, and when this webinar ends, there is a closing survey to let us know how we're doing, and a other comment section where you can submit that future topic, and we'll add it to our poll. So I see about half has voted. So you'll notice you'll only be allowed to select one because we want to see which is the most popular topic. Topics that don't get selected, they'll remain, and we'll have a different topic to fill in the gap. And we're almost there. So again, make sure you select the most popular topic you'd like to review for our February 18 session. So we'll do a countdown. We'll do 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And so popular vote is multi-column region trapping. All right. I don't see any questions. So let me share my slide deck for closing. So again, that PowerPoint in the handout section, if you haven't had a chance to download, you can see here, there's a list of various resources. Our support portal link had changed, so make sure you grab a copy of that. Again, our Ask the Expert, we'll try to host this every third Tuesday of the month. So we'll be here 11:30 Eastern time. Please share with your colleagues. YouTube channel is some how-to helpful videos. I am working to get these videos. I apologize, they haven't been uploaded yet. We had a change to our community, so I need to work with those colleagues in order to get these uploaded to both locations. So the new community support portal, you'll see here on the right, case management is where you have the ability to open a new ticket, follow existing and past tickets. That look and feel is still kind of similar. So if you go to the documentation section, you will see Monarch. Do a search. The help guide is a great resource. Under Altair Exchange, there is our list of models that we have pre-built. Or if you could do a search through the discussion, search for Monarch App Library, and you'll see the pre-built. We have about 3,000. If you ever come to a link and it's not working, please let us know, because again, the community had an update. Some of our links got broke, so just let us know if there's a certain section that you're looking into. But once you find what you're looking for, you'll see the attachment that will have the zip file of those pre-built models and workspaces. Our Learn, our e-learning site, it's a great opportunity to expand your Monarch. Type in Monarch, you'll find that information. You'll see the different courses. We actually do have a certification course, so if you're looking to earn a LinkedIn badge icon, it's a test. It's 40 questions. You get 3 attempts to pass. So find the course you like and continue through that process. Marketplace is where you'll find the latest clients. We're on 2024.1. If your organization hasn't had the opportunity to schedule a complimentary onboarding session, we do have those available. And upcoming events is just our next Ask the Expert. February 18 and March 18th, we'll have our next sessions. The April, May, those future ones, they're not created until the end of basically at the end of the 3rd session. We do it per quarter, but we'll get it updated as soon as possible. So I don't see any other questions. Steve, thank you very much. And if there's nothing, everyone, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you February. Please share along to your peers. Thank you.
Thanks very much, everyone. Thank you.